What happens when a man who possesses everything attempts to humiliate someone he believes has nothing? What occurs when the Titan, draped in the silks of inherited power and insulated by mountains of gold, chooses the wrong battlefield, unaware that the quiet servant before him is not a pawn, but a queen in waiting, patiently observing the board? This is a story about the devastating arrogance of power and the silent, unyielding force of a justice that has waited years to be served. It begins, as such stories often do, in a place built to celebrate excess, a restaurant where the chandeliers weep crystal tears onto patrons who have never known a day of want. The air within l'Orangerie smelled of old money and new perfume, a gilded cage where conversations were held in hushed, confident tones. Through this opulent theater moved Anya, her steps silent on the plush crimson carpet. At 19, she had perfected the art of invisibility, a necessary skill for survival in a world that saw her uniform, not her. Her face was a mask of serene professionalism, her movements economical and precise. She was a ghost refilling glasses of sparkling water, a shadow clearing away the remnants of a feast, her presence acknowledged only by its absence. Tonight, her station was to serve the corner booth, the one reserved for titans, the one currently occupied by Khalid al-Jamil. He was a man carved from privilege, his white thobe immaculate, his red and white keffiyeh held in place by a cord of black silk. He radiated an aura of absolute, unshakable dominion, the kind that bent the very atmosphere around him. Across from him sat a woman with hair the color of spun gold and eyes the color of a shallow sea, her laughter a tinkling, practiced melody that punctuated his every pronouncement. Anya approached their table with a silver tray, her gaze kept respectfully lowered, a study in practiced subservience. Khalid did not even look at her as she placed a small, complimentary amuse-bouche before him. Instead, he turned to his companion, and in a language he was certain was a fortress, he began his assault. His words were a silken, casual cruelty, meant only for the woman beside him, a private joke at the expense of the invisible girl. He commented on the frayed thread at the cuff of Anya's sleeve, a microscopic imperfection he had somehow spotted. He mused on the dullness in her eyes, speculating that they had never witnessed anything more inspiring than a polished fork. He painted a pathetic picture of her life for his date, a cramped apartment, a meager existence, a future as empty and unremarkable as the water glass she was refilling. His companion giggled, a delicate, cruel sound that blended with the clinking of her diamond bracelet against the table. Anya's expression did not flicker. Her hand remained steady as she poured, the water a perfect, silent stream. But beneath the starched white fabric of her uniform, a glacier of fury was moving, grinding stone to dust. Each dismissive word, each condescending chuckle, was a hammer blow against a dam that had been building for a decade. He saw a waitress, a nameless cog in the machinery of his comfort. He had no idea he was speaking to the architect of his ruin, a woman who understood his language better than he understood the fragile foundation upon which his entire world was built. He was a king mocking a peasant, utterly oblivious to the fact that she knew the precise location of the poison in his chalice. The fortress of Anya's composure was built on the bedrock of memory, on a promise made in the cold, damp earth of a cemetery 10 years prior. Her father, Robert Vance, had not been a man of means, but a man of genius. His office had been a chaotic sanctuary of scrolls, blueprints, and leather-bound books that smelled of dust and brilliance. He was an architectural historian, but more than that, he was a visionary. His passion was the forgotten wisdom of the ancients, specifically the ingenious environmental designs of desert architecture. He had spent 2 decades developing a revolutionary system, a modern interpretation of the windcatcher and the shaded courtyard that could cool massive structures with a fraction of the energy consumed by modern air conditioning. It was his life's work, a design philosophy that was not just sustainable, but beautiful, weaving light and air into the very fabric of a building. He had poured everything into it, and finally, he had found a partner to bring it to life. Al-Jamil Enterprises, then helmed by Khalid's formidable father. Robert had trusted him. He had shared his blueprints, his research, his soul. and Al Jamil Enterprises had stolen it all. They had taken his designs, filed patents under their own name, and built their new global headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. As a monument to their innovation, they had crushed him in court with an army of lawyers he could never hope to match, painting him as a disgruntled consultant with delusions of grandeur. The world celebrated the Al Jamil Tower as a marvel of green architecture, and Robert Vance, the true architect, faded into obscurity, his spirit eroded by the acid of betrayal. He died 2 years later, not from any specific illness, but from a broken heart, leaving his then 9-year-old daughter with a mountain of his research and a single, burning purpose. In the years that followed, Anya did not just grieve. She studied. She devoured her father's books, learned the classical, poetic language he had so admired, and memorized every line and curve of his stolen designs. She did not want their money. She wanted something far more absolute. She wanted retribution. Back in the gilded cage of l'orangerie, Khalid Al-Jamil leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, delivering what he intended to be his final, most amusing observation. He gestured vaguely toward Anya with his fork, telling his date that this was the face of someone with no ambition, a creature of simple needs destined to serve men like him forever. He smiled, a flash of predatory white teeth. It was the final stone laid upon the cairn of his arrogance. Anya finished pouring the water. She placed the heavy crystal pitcher back on her silver tray with a soft, deliberate click that seemed to cut through the restaurant's ambient hum. For the first time all evening, she lifted her head and met Khalid's gaze directly. Her eyes were not dull. They were the color of a winter storm, deep and cold, and holding a terrifying clarity. The air at the table thickened, the power dynamic shifting with the silent speed of a striking snake. She opened her mouth, and the words that emerged were not in English. They were in his own tongue, but of a purity and formality that was almost archaic, the language of scholars and poets, not of servants. A structure built on a flawed foundation is destined to collapse, she said, her voice low but carrying an immense weight, each syllable perfectly enunciated. No matter how grand its facade, the fork slipped from Khalid's fingers, clattering onto the porcelain plate with a sharp, discordant sound. The blood drained from his face, leaving his olive skin a pallid gray. His smile vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed mask of disbelief and a dawning, sickening dread. It wasn't just that she understood him. It was what she had said. The phrase was an obscure architectural maxim, a favorite of her father's, but more than that, it was the thematic title of the final, unpublished chapter of his research, the chapter detailing the very designs Al Jamil Enterprises had stolen. His companion stared, her perfectly painted lips parted in confusion, looking from Khalid's horrified face to Anya's cold, impassive one. In that moment, Anya was no longer a waitress. She was a ghost from a past he thought he had buried, standing before him in judgment. This moment was no accident. It was the culmination of a 2-year campaign waged from the shadows. Anya's life outside the restaurant was a tapestry of methodical obsession. The waitress job was merely the listening post, a way to study her target's habits, his arrogance, his vulnerabilities. Her real work took place in dusty university archives and over encrypted video calls with the last 2 people on Earth who had remained loyal to her father's memory. The first was Marcus Thorne, a retired investigative journalist whose flinty cynicism was a shield for a core of fierce integrity. He had been a friend of her father's, one of the few who had believed him. Now, with a weary sigh and a fire in his belly, he taught Anya the art of digging. He showed her how to follow money, how to file information requests that looked innocuous, how to find the digital ghosts in a corporate server. Together, they unearthed the faint but undeniable trail of her father's original submission emails, buried deep in Al Jamil's archived servers, and the subsequent deletion orders that came directly from Khalid's father. The second ally was Dr. Lena Petrova, a brilliant but marginalized architectural theorist at a distant university. She had been Robert Vance's protégé and was professionally sidelined for defending him. With a quiet, academic fury, She took Anya's father's old hard drives and meticulously authenticated the metadata on his digital blueprints, creating an unbreakable timeline that proved his work predated the Al-Jamil patents by at least 18 months. She helped Anya translate his complex theories into a clear, devastating narrative of intellectual theft. While Anya served champagne and cleared tables, her mind was a whirlwind of timelines, data points, and legal precedents. She wasn't just waiting. She was building her case, brick by undeniable brick, constructing a prison of truth from which Khalid al-Jamil would have no escape. Her father had built with light and air. She was building with evidence and rage. The stage for the final act was chosen with poetic precision, the annual Pinnacle Award Gala, hosted by the Global Architectural Forum. This year's grand prize, the award for Visionary Design in Sustainable Urbanism, was being presented to the Al-Jamil Group for their flagship tower, the very building born from her father's stolen genius. The irony was so profound it was almost biblical. The event was held in the atrium of the new Museum of Modern Design, a cavernous space of white marble and soaring glass walls. The air buzzed with the self-congratulatory murmur of the world's architectural elite. Anya moved through the glittering crowd, a specter of vengeance in a simple, severe black dress that absorbed the light around her. She wore no jewelry, only the weight of her purpose. Marcus, looking deeply uncomfortable in a rented tuxedo, had secured her a press pass as his assistant. He guided her through the throngs of designers and developers, his hand a steadying presence on her back. She saw Khalid near the main stage, holding court, accepting praise with the easy grace of a man who believed he deserved it. He was laughing, his head thrown back, a king in his castle. He had clearly dismissed the incident at the restaurant as a bizarre, unsettling anomaly, a strange dream he could erase with wealth and influence. He did not see the ghost watching him from across the room. He did not see the storm that was about to break over his head. Anya's heart was a cold, heavy stone in her chest, but her resolve was absolute. Tonight, she was not Robert Vance's grieving daughter. She was his legacy, his vindication, and his final, perfect design. The evening wore on, a symphony of polite applause and self-important speeches. Finally, Khalid al-Jamil took the stage to accept his award. He held the gleaming, abstract trophy aloft as cameras flashed, his face a portrait of magnanimous success. He spoke of vision, of legacy, of his family's commitment to building a better future. Anya listened to every hollow word, her fury icing over into a state of pure, crystalline focus. After his speech, the floor was open for questions from the press. A few softballs were lobbed about future projects and market trends. Then, a hand went up in the third row. It was Marcus. The moderator nodded at him. Marcus Thorne, independent journalism, he said, his voice gravelly but clear. Mr. Al-Jamil, a magnificent achievement. I'm curious about the core inspiration for the tower's unique atmospheric well cooling system. It's truly revolutionary. Was it the work of a single visionary or a team effort? Khalid smiled, prepared for this. Innovation is always a team effort, but the seed of the idea, the guiding vision, came from my late father. The lie was smooth, practiced. Marcus nodded slowly. Fascinating, he said before adding, my colleague has a follow-up question on that very point. Before the moderator could object, Marcus turned and handed the microphone to Anya. She stepped forward, out of the shadows and into the stark glare of the stage lights. A murmur went through the press corps. Khalid squinted, his smile faltering as he recognized the face from the restaurant. A flicker of confusion, then annoyance, crossed his features. Anya's voice, amplified by the sound system, filled the vast atrium. It was not loud, but it was perfectly clear, cutting through the silence with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. My name is Anya Vance, she began. And my question is for the historical record. How can your father claim to be the visionary behind a design he stole, piece by piece, from the man who is actually responsible for it? A man named Robert Vance. My father. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. All eyes swiveled from Anya to the man frozen on the stage. Khaled's face had become a mask of chalky white, his eyes wide with the sudden, visceral terror of a man watching his own executioner approach. Before he could stammer a denial, before security could even begin to move, a new light flooded the atrium. The massive presentation screen behind Khaled, which had been displaying the Al Jamil Group's logo, flickered and changed. On the left side of the screen, a series of complex, hand-annotated blueprints appeared, bearing a digital timestamp from over a decade ago. On the right, the official, award-winning schematics for the Al Jamil Tower materialized. They were nearly identical. Dr. Petrova, from a laptop hundreds of miles away, had seized control of the presentation. Anya, her voice never wavering, began her lecture. Using the precise, technical language of an expert, she walked the stunned audience through the evidence. She pointed out the stolen concepts one by one: the biomimetic airflow vents based on termite mounds, the hydropanel integration, the foundational principles of the atmospheric well system itself. "This is not inspiration," she declared, her voice ringing with righteous fury. "This is theft." A verbatim copy of a genius's life work. Then, the screen changed again, displaying scanned copies of her father's submission documents, followed by the damning internal emails Marcus had unearthed, showing the explicit order from Khaled's father to his legal team to secure the intellectual property by any means necessary and handle Robert Vance. The proof was absolute, irrefutable, and displayed for the entire world to see. It was a checkmate delivered on a global stage. Khaled Al-Jamil stood silently, bathed in the glow of his own crime, a king dethroned not by an army, but by a 19-year-old girl with a perfect memory. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The gala ended not with applause, but with the chaotic shouting of reporters and the blinding flash of cameras capturing Khaled's utter ruin. He was escorted from the stage by his panicked staff, unable to form a single coherent sentence. The story was a firestorm, leading every newscast and gracing the front page of every major financial paper the next morning. The words fraud, theft, and Al Jamil were forever linked. The Pinnacle Award was rescinded before sunrise. The company's stock plummeted in the opening minutes of trading, wiping out billions in value. An avalanche of investigations, corporate, federal, international, was launched. The empire built on a stolen dream began to crumble into dust. Anya watched it all from the quiet of her small apartment, a ghost who had finally completed her haunting. She did not celebrate. There was no joy in this, only a profound, aching sense of release, of a great weight finally lifted. A few weeks later, she took a train to the small, quiet cemetery where her father was buried. She knelt and wiped the dust from his headstone, the name Robert Vance seeming to stand out more clearly in the afternoon sun. She placed a newspaper on the grass before it, the headline bold and clear: "The Vance Vindication. How a forgotten genius's daughter exposed a decade of deceit. His name was cleared. His genius was at last acknowledged. Her promise was kept. The war was over. She could finally rest, not as a vengeful daughter, but simply as herself, the keeper of a legacy now rightfully restored. Her father had designed buildings that breathed. In avenging him, she, too, could finally breathe again. Hubris is a tower built on sand, and the higher it reaches, the more certain its collapse. Khaled Al-Jamil believed his power made him untouchable, that his wealth was a shield against consequence. He looked at a young woman in a waitress uniform and saw not a person, but an object, something so far beneath him that she was unworthy of basic respect. He never imagined that behind her quiet deference was a mind like a steel trap, a heart fueled by a righteous cause, and a plan as meticulously designed as the very architecture his family had stolen. He thought he was playing a game with a pawn, only to find himself in checkmate against a queen who had been patiently waiting across the board for 10 long years. Anya's victory wasn't just about exposing a crime, it was about reclaiming a legacy. It was a testament to the idea that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a persistent and powerful gravity and will eventually find its way to the light. She sought not wealth, but justice, not revenge, but restoration. In the end, She proved that the most formidable structures are not built of steel and glass, but of integrity, love, and an unbreakable will. If you are cheering for Anya's meticulous plan to come together, for the moment she finally cornered the man who represented everything that had destroyed her family, give this video a like. Let us know in the comments what you think constitutes true justice. Was this the perfect way to dismantle an empire built on lies? What do you think Anya will do next, now that her father's name is cleared? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories where the overlooked and underestimated rise up to reclaim what is rightfully theirs.